Hey, and welcome to the Story Studio podcast. Today we have a full house. We're joined by Mark Dawson and James Blatch, who have interviewed us a few times. So it's kind of fun. We've been on both sides of it. They're both in a safer land than we are and have better ways of speaking than us. And they know a hell of a lot about publishing, especially in today's day. And so welcome to the show for both of you. It's great to have you guys both on. It's the first time we've had you both on.
We're not on together anywhere very much, are we? Apart from our own show.
No.
Well, I love that though, because so in preparation of this, we've been kind of underground for the last couple of years, and in preparation for this, we kind of wanted to get the pulse of the industry, and so I listened to the last year of your show. And
sorry about that.
No, it's been really
What's
great.
the name of their show, Sean?
Well, see, that's why I avoided it, because I thought I was going to flub it because I just think of it as the Mark Dawson show.
What?
I'm so sorry. And I know that's my whole point, is that it was really important that James be on this show because I bond with him. I hear his voice, a lot more than
You just
Mark's.
don't know the name of the show.
So,
Yeah.
well,
Is it something like the James Blatch show? Is it the James Blatch show? And we changed our name, to be fair, Sean. We changed our name. We used to be, what did we used to be? The Self-Publishing Formula Podcast.
That's the one that is on the mug that I have.
Yes, okay, but it's not that. What is it now?
Well, I was messing around on those domain name things once, and I said to Mark, do you know the selfpublishingshow.com has not been taken by anyone? So we are now the Self-Publishing Show.
Okay, all right. The Self-Publishing Show, which is the best show out there.
I had a feeling that we had that domain at one point.
Oh, you let it go. Probably for about 10 minutes, and I was in there.
We let a lot
Years
of domains go in our time. But it's I love the format of the show because you kind of cue it up at the beginning and then you round it out at the end, and then there's a meaty interview in the middle, and it's just really effective. It's way more professional than anything we've ever done, where we just kind of get to the talking.
All an illusion, but anyway. But that's what I was trained by the BBC to make things look professional. That's all. That's all that journalist training was.
It works so well. And just to preface this conversation, I do want to say, not just do you have such a great show? It really is. If there is one podcast to pick, it would absolutely should be yours 10 times before it should be ours. And, in that education space, I just want to add to that you guys give the best education in this space, like bar none. And there's not even a close second from where I'm coming from what authors actually need to learn, which is how to run it like a business. And especially in the pay-to-play economy that we have, like you guys are a base level skill. It is as important to know what you're teaching as it is basic story structure. Like the two really have to harmonize. And it's been interesting to watch what you've done over the last, is it about 5 years now? About that? Because when you first came on the scene, it was a good voice, and Mark came on our show, I think a couple of times, and, great story, great success, obviously a really good numbers guy, good marketer, but I also am like a little jaded because I came from not only a marketing copywriting background, but a ghostwriting background, and saw a lot of bullshit, a lot of people selling a lot of stuff they shouldn't have been selling. And I saw that starting to creep into the industry. Of course, it happens, it's going to. But what you guys have done is exceeded my expectations in every possible way, where the information just gets better and better, and you didn't sell a course and then walk away from it. You support it. It gets better over time, and you support the community, and the education is always there. And instead of, there is a wave of people who came in and took advantage of the market. What you did is you amplified the market. You made the market a better place. And so Thank you for the work that you've done over the last 5 years, because we really need legitimate education out there. And I haven't seen anything better. So thank you for what you do in a space that really needs it.
Wow.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. No, we try hard. It's one of the things that we really pay attention to, is making sure we deliver quality and good value for money as well, because the courses aren't cheap. We're not going to pretend that they're cheap, but what we try to do is to over deliver in terms of what authors get. So, when I first came on the show 5 years ago, the course we had was Facebook ads for authors, and that was all it was, because that was what I was doing, Facebook ads. And subsequent to that, we've added, Amazon ads, BookBub ads, copywriting, image design, lots and lots of other stuff. Instagram, Pinterest.
It's a curriculum. I mean, you're offering curriculum. And that's
what we never ever wanted to do, and we haven't done, is ever charged anyone who bought the Facebook ads for authors courses, never paid another cent for a course which is now probably 5 times longer than it was. And we update it as well. So when Facebook changes the interface, which they do just before we launch usually, which is really generous. This I mean me really. I have to go back and re-record all the stuff with the screen flows with me doing stuff on the interface, because there would be nothing more annoying for someone who's trying to learn something that they've just spent a good amount of money on, to find out that their screen doesn't match the screen that they're looking at, my screen.
But you do know how rare that kind of attention is.
Yeah, I know. And I do. And you're right. I've seen it too. There are lots of people kind of muscling into the education industry side of things. And one of the first things I always tell people, if they're thinking about taking a course, and there's loads of others, and there are others that will be better teachers than me, or the people that we have. But one of the first things I always suggest is that they should check to make sure the instructor is able to sell their own books, because and it's not that hard to find,
or that they're actually a writer.
Yeah, exactly. They need to walk the walk and talk the talk, and there are lots of people who don't do that. And so why would you want to learn from someone who can't sell their own books?
Because it's easy, because you click, you buy the course, and it makes you feel like you've inched closer to your dream without actually having to do the work. And that's where my jadedness came from. I mean, there's a couple things that are different between now and 5 years ago. First of all, I really did spend some time with people who laughed about how low the completion rates are, and on their open rates, and it's such a dirty space. Just
to hop in on this too, is just because Sean's giving you you're on the show sort of thing, but just behind the scenes, it would have been everybody in this is guilty until proven innocent almost. It's like, it would have been so easy just quietly for Sean to be like, yeah, they're really full of shit. But that absolutely didn't happen, and it happened with a lot of other people. So 2 quick questions just to clarify before we really get rolling here is, first of all, where is the most current place to find out everything that you guys do educationally?
That's selfpublishingformula.com. So that's our kind of home base for the author side of things.
Okay, so selfpublishingformula.com. And then the second question I would ask is, Mark, I know you're not a braggart, but could you just give us a quick idea of, when you say, had success selling your books, what does that mean right now for you?
I've sold, I'm never entirely sure. It's certainly over 3 million books. It's between 3 and 4 million books over the last, 5 years or so. And 7 figures for the last 3 or 4, which is still kind of ludicrous and amazing. But yeah, it's been a good run. And
is that the Milton series, or are there others in that?
No, that's everything. So, there's Milton, Beatrix, a spin-off from that series. I've got a new detective series I'm working on. The first one was out about 6 months ago. Audiobooks, quite a big area for me. We're moving into comics now, which is going to be quite fun. Film and TV. So there's lots of different. My view, you touched on it earlier, is it is the business side of things. So once I've written something, then that's it's got lots of different. I hate the word monetize, but there's lots.
It's an asset. You want to
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a widget at that point. It's an ASIN. It's something that you have lots of different IPs attached to that creative idea, and then you can sell those things individually. And I hate leaving money on the table as well. So I'm always trying to find better ways to exploit those properties.
So one place to start the conversation is, another difference between then and now is, when you had the first course, which was Facebook for authors, that had some alarm bells, because Facebook is a place you could just lose your shit. Like, you just lose it. And the particular cocktail of abilities and sensibilities required for good Facebook ads, especially then, you know, copywriting and understanding image placement and conversion and all of this stuff is not the suite of abilities that the average author has. And so I felt that that was dangerous, you know, because if authors start like playing a numbers game and not really working on the craft or losing their money, it becomes dangerous. But what you did beautifully and brilliantly was to evolve that. So it's not Facebook, it's ads and then everything else. I mean, there's a lot of ancillary stuff now too, but the core is still advertising. And the difference between then and now is pretty dramatic. You know, even in 2015, you could still get visibility without placing any ads. There was still a way to do that. Now you had a future-proof business and I didn't even see that. And I'm pretty good at seeing a couple years into the future. But this was like, now you're indispensable because people need to advertise their books or they cannot get any visibility. So how sure were you that that was the way things are going? And what does the last 5 years look like as it's become, you know, almost in a completely pay to play, at least when you're starting out and trying to get a little bit of visibility?
It was back when I was on the show originally. I remember thinking I discovered like this amazing ATM where I just go press a button and it would spit money at me every day. I spoke to my accountant. I remember saying to him, because I'm not great at maths, and you say I'm a numbers guy, I'm really not. I've struggled a bit with maths, and James is much better at that than I am. And I remember thinking, I'm pretty sure I've just made 400% return on investment, but that doesn't seem, well, you know, things when they sound too good to be true, they usually are. So I spoke to my accountant, and
they usually cost $97.
Yeah, exactly. I said, look, can you, he was, he wanted to invest because he was like, yeah, those numbers are correct. You are making that return, so you know, do more of it. So, you know, I wouldn't say that I foresaw this was something that was going to become indispensable or that advertising would be something that you couldn't do without to be a successful author. But by the same token, one of the things I did early on was to look at other industries that had started to be touched by digital progress before bookselling. So, you know, music, film and TV, all of these were maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of us. And you can just look at what's happening in those industries and then extrapolate and see, could it be the same for us? And, you know, and also it's advertising. Advertising has always been a thing. And as more channels and more places that you can advertise have opened up, it stands to reason that more authors would get into those and it would become more and more necessary. So I don't think I foresaw it, but I probably had an inkling that it was going to be more and more important as time went on.
Let's talk about advertising actually, because I mean, there's all sorts of people who are going to be listening to this. And I think that there's probably a large number of people who are not sold on the idea that you really need to advertise books, that you can do the things that we originally talked about in Write, Publish, Repeat, which was very light on advertising. It was all about funnels and stuff. And I mean, your opinion for either of you, how essential is advertising for authors in today's market?
James, you answer that with your Fuse hat on.
We've got two good examples, actually. You can talk about Germany in a moment. But yeah, we started a imprint at the beginning of this year. I've been going on to Mark for a couple of years that there are people who have good books, really good books, actually, and just either don't want to do the marketing as a conscious decision or are just colossally bad at it through no fault of their own, just something they can't get the culture of it. Or in this case, are no longer with us. So there is a room, although we kind of see traditional publishing as something people should only go to really if they're eyes open about giving away 90% of the income to somebody in return for what exactly, be clear about that. It's not for everyone. We're pro self-publishing. We think there definitely is a space for them. We've seen them growing up, some fantastic little publishers doing a 50-50 kind of deal, very much new publishing for me. So I've been going on to Mark for a couple of years about this, and yeah, sadly, an author called Robert Story passed away in March last year. He was one of our students. He'd been in touch with me a couple of times, and then his parents got in touch to give me the news and told me that they wanted, if they could have access to the course, because they wanted to keep his books going. They were in their 70s, and I gave them everything they needed to help and had a chat with Mark, and then wrote this tentative email to them saying, do you know what? We've been thinking about an imprint. This might be a perfect opportunity. And they were very open to that. So we took over the books on February the 1st this year, 6 books. near Earth future sci-fi slight ancient origin series. And I could see from all their figures that they had peaked at about $100,000 a year a couple of years ago, the whole 6 series. By the time we took them over, they were dropping 10% a month because Robert had stopped advertising in 2018. By end of 2019, by 2018, by the end of 19, they were down to $2,000 a month and dropping. And if without advertising, you could see in numbers, people were no longer seeing these books on Amazon and were no longer buying them. We started advertising in February, immediately started reversing that. Last month, we did $11,000 of revenue on the books, spent quite a lot as well, about 7,000. So something like, I've got my maths right. I used to just say I'm good at maths, but I think we made about $4,500 profit last month. It'll be 7,000 profit this month, which 50-50 with the parents is great. But there, in black and white, should anyone wish to see it, is what advertising does to books.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I heard that on the show. It's a great illustration because it is easy, especially in a creative field. You think, but my writing is so good. Yeah. My characters are just so awesome. And you know what? They may be, but readers just don't care that much. They're in a hurry. And if that guy's story, even if your story is the best ever, there's still another story that's 95% as good. It's like a click away. And that 5% doesn't make as much of a difference to the reader as it does to the writer. So we have this inflated sense of importance, and it's just not there for the reader. You know, they want what's easy and fast, and conversion elements are what matters.
Present.
And present. Yeah.
And present, it's in front of them. What is the, so I'm imagining that I'm trying to get myself in the head of like the average person listening who isn't doing advertising. And it seems to me that there's going to be a sort of a dip either way. So it's sort of like you're rolling down the road in a beat up Chevy Nova that it'll go get where you want to go, but it's not going very well. And then you have to park that Chevy Nova by the side of the road, get out, figure out how to use the new car, get into it. Like it takes a while, I imagine, before you have to take your foot off the gas, in other words, to basically spend money to make money. So what does that end up looking like? Because if you're plunking along and you're making $2,000 a month, and we're like, guys, you could be making $10,000 a month, but first you're going to have to put money in and you're going to make less for a little while. So what does that journey look like for people, and how do they get through it?
Well, you probably need to continue that analogy. You need a roadmap. It would be quite easy to just kind of get into the new car and see where it takes you, and then go down a road that ends with you giving Mark Zuckerberg lots of money. Because you haven't tested the ads, but you don't really know what you're doing. So it is, I think you do need to be able to understand how to place the ads effectively, what kinds of things you need to be looking for in terms of, what the image needs to look like, and the copy and all that kind of stuff. You could do it yourself, but that would just mean that your journey will be quite a lot longer than it would be if you had something pointing in the right direction. So yeah, I think you do. People who are thinking about advertising, they do need to factor into account the likelihood that the first month or two are going to be, you're going to have to invest. And it's not just kind of pissing money away. You're investing in your education. You're learning about what works and what doesn't work in advertising. And my view is, and I've made tons of mistakes, I'll make a mistake once, but I'll try very hard not to make it twice. And so over time, you hope that you get better at figuring out what works in the specific, not just the industry that we're in, but also the genre that we're in, because conventions change from romance to sci-fi to thrillers to everything. So, there is a learning curve for sure, and it can be expensive if you don't get that right. But it's
yes, but guessing is expensive, and the thing is, more expensive. If you're willing to. So earlier when we were talking about your course, and we're not affiliates for the course, guys, or like I'm saying this because I believe in it, but you referred to the course earlier as it's expensive, which I don't think it is. I've seen a lot of information products out there, and a lot of them are like grossly overpriced for what you actually get. And that's just not the case here. I actually think it's way more expensive to not have a foundational knowledge. And, even if you're just not ready to place the ads necessarily, but looking through some of those modules to give you a working understanding of how this economy works is just a smart thing to do in 2020. And ignoring the way the advertising works is it's just wearing blinders, and it's ignoring the reality of the marketplace. And that seems dangerous for everybody. So it's not just that the market's matured a little bit. You can't just put stuff up. You have to go practically thinking about it like a business. And that means not just that I'm going to take this course, but I'm going to set aside money in addition to the course because I have to learn how this works. And you can't do that with $5. You need money to see how the charts are going to work and look at it over time. And so do you try to encourage that, or is that kind of hard for people to get their head around because they feel like a failure right away if their ads aren't like working?
I actually had one today in the we have a Facebook community like everyone else does these days, and we had one of our students posted that he'd spent a lot of money without any success, and so he said, look, I don't want anyone to tell me to look at my covers or my blurbs because I've done that a million times. But of course, that's the first thing I looked at. So I went and looked at his covers and blurbs, and the covers were quite poor. Not all of them, but most of them were quite poor. The blurbs didn't really work, and he had 1 or 2 reviews on his books, and he'd spent $500 or $600 on, I think in some cases more than that on the ads. And you got to think about it in a very dispassionate way. So you have to divorce yourself from thinking about it as a creator, someone who's spent a lot of time and energy and is committed to this creative project for maybe 6 months, however long it took to write the novel. Once you write the end, you have to become something completely different, and that's a dispassionate marketer. And you have to understand that your potential readers don't give a shit about how long it took you to write that novel. They want to be entertained, and they want to know what they're going to get when they see the ad. They click the ad. You got to have a congruent experience. So the ad mustn't promise something that the actual ASIN doesn't deliver. So you've got to see it in that kind of way, and not everyone can do that. And I think this guy, I've tried to help him, and we'll help him a little bit more. But I think he'd got to the stage now where he'd changed things so much, his covers and his blurbs, that he wasn't prepared to. He didn't think they could be wrong, and they were very obviously still wrong. And so sometimes you have to give fairly hard advice to people like that. That can be a bit stinging sometimes, but there's no point in sugarcoating that kind of stuff because he will just waste more money. So hopefully he'll go away now and we'll think about it in a dispassionate sense. Look at his competition. Who's he trying to steal readers from? If he's writing books like me, Lee Child is a competitor of mine. I want to nick Lee Child's readers, or not nick them, but kind of show my books to his readers, and maybe they'll read both of our books. You just have to be a little bit more than a creator these days, because I don't think you can only wear the one hat and be successful, which may not have been the case 5 years ago.
Right.
Yes. Can I ask you a question actually to expand on that in terms of mindset? You talked a lot about being able to be dispassionate and to be able to kind of disconnect and not be precious about your work. Is that the main thing that you see people needing to do in terms of making that mental leap, or are there other things once you've been able to disconnect a little bit that an author who maybe hasn't been good at marketing in the past believes that we need to adopt in order to get good at it?
I would say one of the things that we used to love doing before the virus changed everything was send James and John, who works with us, they'll go and get testimonials from students who'd done very well. So they'd fly to the States. James likes going to Barcelona to see a guy called Mark Recklow on a yacht, which we won't go into that. He says it's for testimonials, but I'm calling bullshit on that one. But one of the things that when I see those, I love getting those rushes back, those videos that James has recorded, because you can see that often it's people who are making their lives have completely changed. So they're not doing the 9 to 5. They might be making more money in their writing career than they've ever made before, or even small amounts. They've maybe retired their husband, which is one of the trends I've loved seeing over the last 18 months or so. One of the things you see with
a similar amount of money, but they're happier, they're fulfilled.
Yeah, exactly. They're doing what they've always wanted to do. One of the things that you see in those people is they tend to be, and I can't actually think of an exception right now, they all have the ability to address their creative output in a commercial sense. So it's kind of, so I've written it now I have to sell it. And they understand that the writing and the selling are two completely different disciplines. One involves heart, and the other one involves the head, and they're not necessarily they may not mix all that well. So you need to, the way I look at it is I write in the morning and I sell in the afternoon. That tends to be how I try to do my own stuff. And you can kind of see variations of that with people like Lucy Score, who is, has hit #1 in the .com store, Shane Silvers with Urban Fantasy, similar, 7-figure authors now. We've had, I don't know how many testimonies we've done there, James, must be between 50 and 100.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, lots.
And they all share that. So to answer the question, Bonnie, that is a trait that they may not always like doing it. They may kind of begrudgingly do it sometimes. And I get that, because there are things about this that I don't love doing, but they know that it's necessary and they do it and they concentrate on it.
I think it's worth saying, just reminding people that it is hard. There's a culture in the whole advertising side, which is very different from the culture in writing and publishing. There's a language that means nothing to you at the beginning and is actually off-putting. And I think a lot of people maybe don't get past that. So actually, I would say, although I'm very much part of the SPF, I'd say that's what I got out of being with Mark and doing his courses, is it doesn't happen straight away, but gradually seeps in. You gradually start understanding how that world works. It doesn't make it, the hard work doesn't go away, and I still have to do stuff every single day and keep on. My Facebook account got shut down this weekend. That sort of thing happens from time to time in this world. But it's odd to me, sometimes you meet people who bristle a bit about advertising and say it doesn't work or they don't want to do it. And I sometimes think it's because they haven't applied the same things they applied to writing a novel. And God knows I know more than anyone else. It's really hard writing a novel, really hard publishing it, getting it out there. Applying that same thing to advertising yields so much benefit to all the work you did with the novel, yet some people don't seem to be able to do the same thing with advertising and marketing that they did with that process against the novel. But I have sympathy for that. I'm not trying to be berating of people. It is hard. It's a different world, and it just takes a while before things start clicking.
Well, I think part of it too is what I was saying earlier about, take the course, not just because you're going to place the ads, but because you understand the way things work. And really, by the way things work, what I mean is the way buyers think, what buyers are looking for. Because if you get really good at that, I'm a good example here because I'm really glad we have a marketing department, because I actually wouldn't want to place the ads. Like nothing about that appeals to me. I love the actual strategies of ads and, thinking about what the funnels look like. And I like the conversion part, but actually going into dashboards, just not my jam at all. So I'm lucky that we have that. But I think that what makes it fun is that I do have an understanding of buyers. And so even in addition to the ad department, we put a lot of attention into conversion while we're telling our stories. Mm-hmm. And that's because of that working knowledge. It makes the advertising easier at the end because it's never not with us. So even when we have our precious artist hats on, we are thinking about commercial hooks and, how we're going to sell that book. And even, Bonnie and I have a line of ridiculously uncommercial books that we're working on because they're important to us. And, they're standalones and they're rather literary and they're not going to be easy to sell. But even so, we're making sure they're as easy to sell as possible before we even get to Once Upon a Time, because we know how people kind of think. Doesn't mean you're going to get it right. You're probably going to get it wrong at least as much as you get it right, because humans are fickle and behavior is fickle. But the more that you just understand those principles, the less icky marketing seems and the more fun and creative and part of the story it can become.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it occurs to me the advantage that authors who self-publish and self-market have in the wider world of business. My first career was in computing, and I used to be a programmer, an analyst programmer. And we dealt a lot with the sales guys selling us, in those days, computers filled rooms, and they were $1 million every time you bought a new one. And there were big decisions. And so you had a very close contact relationship with IBM or Tandem in our case. And the sales guys, they were the sales guys and the engineers. The engineer was in every week because there were problems with these things. And he knew our business inside out. And he was the guy who sold us the next computer. And the sales guys would come in, they'd take us off flying for the weekend or golf or whatever. But we made sure the engineer was the guy who got paid, because their company worked the way every company works. You've got a sales team over there, product designers and builders there, kind of admin in the middle, and they don't really cross over as much as they should. It's a perennial problem in business. But if the guy who designed the product spent every day with the customer, they would design a different product, a better product, one that suited and meshed. Well, self-publishing authors are in that perfect position. If you're the person placing the ad, writing the copy, looking at how many people clicked on that ad, how many people viewed it, then went through and bought, and what else they bought at the same time, all of that stuff's going to feed back into a better product, right? So,
yes. If you effectively market a trilogy, your next trilogy is going to be more in tune to the market. Yeah. And that's just creative math. So it's not just about how well can you get your ads to scale. It's how can you get your knowledge base to start working for you.
Yeah. And you just said that it feeds into the way that you write the books, the way that people read them, which is a kind of obvious thing to say, but strangely in publishing over the years hasn't necessarily been a mantra that's been as strong as it is in other
because
industries.
People don't talk about that, and it's one of those invisible things that you start adopting this superpower that you don't even realize you have, and you're telling better stories. You're telling stories that are more likely to land on a bullseye because you're just whetting, your blade against the stone over and over and over. So as far as the ad platforms that are working, is it safe to assume it's still the holy trinity of AMS ads, Facebook ads, and BookBub ads?
Yeah, that hasn't changed. The only kind of variance there is that maybe the swing between them has altered a bit. So when 5 years ago it was really Facebook, you couldn't advertise on Amazon. And that's changed now. I mean, my ad spend is probably, I don't know, at the moment 70-30 in favor of Amazon with Facebook, and then obviously BookBub still. People who say BookBub deals don't work anymore. That's ridiculous. They work extremely well in terms of the actual return on investment. They're really strong, and the CPC, we work out how many clicks and how much those clicks cost. It's not even close to anything else. So they're still super effective. The only difference with BookBub is that you can't get those as often as you want, and you can place Facebook ads and Amazon ads to run pretty much whenever you want them to. So. Those are the platforms. And then, even with Amazon, there's now there are different kinds of Amazon ads. So you've got what we used to call AMS, now Amazon Advertising. And then over the top of that, you've got AMG, which is Amazon Media Group. So kind of curated, a curated ad experience. God, that sounds wanky. But costing, a lot of money, and the minimum spend is in the 5 figures a month. But if you want to absolutely inundate your genre, your potential readers, that's a very good way to do it.
Can we talk a little bit about what needs to happen off of
Johnny,
the ad dash?
I don't know if you're muted or something, but you're not coming through.
I heard you, Johnny.
Now? It's been.
I hear him.
Okay, yeah, it's.
Oh, it was all me. Never mind.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit about what needs to happen off of the ad dashboards? Because I think that there's a tendency. I think there's two ways people swing. Well, there's many ways, but I think there's two sort of, proceed with caution ways that people swing with ads. One is, I'm not going to do it at all because my books are beautiful and I don't need to do it and I don't want to spend the money. And the other is maybe the opposite, where it's a magic button. And well, I got my book and now I just need to go push this button enough times and it will generate money. And I know that there's a lot that we've done that in terms of cleaning up calls to action for sequels and funnels. Sean is going to be able to talk a little better to that. But it's not just pushing a button on an ad. So what needs to happen just as for the rest of your marketing, the rest of your post-production, the rest of that to make an ad more successful, say, or successful at all?
One thing is that it's very effective. I think I could probably sell a first book by most authors pretty well. Let's assume they've got decent covers and they're packaged well. I think it's quite easy to sell that first book lots of times potentially. That might not be profitable. And the reason for that is if the book isn't good and the reader doesn't enjoy it, it doesn't matter how many of the first one I sell, I'll never sell another to that reader again, because they'll remember, I remember that book I read. It was terrible. I didn't finish it. It didn't deliver on any of the things that the ad promised. So I'll forget that author, never buy from him again or her again. So, you've got to, once you've made the sale, it's then back on you as the writer again. So you need to write a story that is compelling and gets readers to want to buy either more in your series or more from you. And kind of an example I had actually just kind of reinforced this week. I had a new Milton book out on Saturday, and it did really well. And it had about 8,500 pre-orders, and then is selling really strongly right now. So very pleasing on that front. But the book before it, the book before the one before, I inadvertently ended it on a massive cliffhanger, and I didn't mean to. And I got lots of grief from readers because I'd ended it on a cliffhanger. So it wasn't like, it wasn't what you would deem a cliffhanger. It didn't have Milton hanging from his fingertips from a cliff. What it did have was it kind of left a fairly large loop unclosed. And I thought readers wouldn't mind that. It would tee them up for the next one. And some of them, sorry, go on, Dave.
Was it, because we've struggled with this ourselves. We used to do serials, and now we're doing more, standalone in a series books. Was your open loop something that was like in the epilogue that didn't have much to do with the story, or was it part of the story that was left unresolved?
It was. So if you think about it, kind of a video game analogy, the first book had ended with a fairly significant boss being defeated, but the big boss was still out there, and the kind of ending to the book hinted towards an unresolved battle. So, okay.
And people got mad about that. Wow.
They did a bit. But the weird thing was, although I got lots of emails from people, well, I say a lot. I mean, it's just that all authors will focus on the ones, the emails that are angry rather than the ones that are pleased.
Yes.
But looking at the actual figures on the downloads, so I had 8,500 pre-orders for this book that came out this week. For the one before that, which was the conclusion of that open loop, I had about 14,500. So that's proof in the pudding that cliffhangers, they definitely work. They can really piss people off, but you guys know this from back, Yesterday's Gone and back in the day. They're very effective.
Yes, it's a really good example of readers say one thing and they behave a different way. So if you were to survey readers, take 100 readers, maybe 85 of them would say, I hate cliffhangers. I won't buy the next book. It pisses me off. Well, that's not true. It's not true at all. Cliffhangers are really effective, and it's just human psychology. People want their questions answered. If you leave an open loop, you got to answer it.
But I mean, something we learned early on, though, you got to give them a complete story in addition to that open loop. You can't just tell half of a story or 3/4 and just, we'll get to the next.
Yes, but that's just good storytelling. And really, that's you have to think about the reader experience. And if a reader gets a full story and then there's a new wound opened, that's acceptable. You delivered on your promise. You never promised you weren't going to give them a cliffhanger. You promised them a good story. So as long as you give them the good story, I think a cliffhanger is acceptable, because it's fun. Now, here's an example of where this was done really poorly. Now, I mean, the series was very successful, but if Johnny and I could do it over again, I think there's several things we would have done differently with Invasion. Now, Invasion ends on a really strong cliffhanger, but it doesn't really deliver on the promise of the book, on the title. And so that's a big mistake. Like you
should have called it Before the Invasion.
Yeah, spoiler alert, there is no invasion in Invasion. All right. It is pre-invasion, and the invasion doesn't
There's
really
an invasion. They're just on their way. They just haven't arrived yet. It's like if you ordered guests to a party and it took them a while, you wouldn't say they're not coming.
That's like watching an adult film that's just foreplay. Come on.
Yeah, it's just the plumber coming in. Yeah, and he actually fixes the washing machine.
Right.
Actually, I'd hire that guy.
Unfortunately, that's what we deliver to readers. And so that's an example of where I don't think our cliffhanger was as effective. If it had been we could have the same exact ending, but I think it would have 10x'd our results if we had told a slightly different story or had a different name for the book. Or, I think that reader expectations are really important. To Mark's point, it's easy to sell the first book, but what you're really selling is a relationship. Does this author keep their promises or not? And I felt like with Invasion, we told a good story, but we made a flimsy promise, which I didn't realize at the time. I actually really like the fact that there's not an invasion, just to be clear. I think it's a good narrative choice, but it's not a commercial choice the way we sold that. So, 5 years more experience, I'm sure we would have brought that to market differently. But that's why you do this. That's why you learn. That's why you scale.
Still did pretty well though.
Yeah, no, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying there's a difference between, in fact, because it did so well, that actually gives us more data points. We can read those reviews. We actually know the limitations of that series because that series did really well. Some of the stuff that we put out that just fizzled, we don't know as much why. We don't know what could have made it better. So, and until recently, this is actually worth talking about. Until recently, we actually weren't advertising at all. Like, we've been in heavy production mode. And so this last year was a matter of like, okay, let's get back. We've got a few hundred titles in our catalog. Let's go. And we refreshed ourselves with your course. So that's why I can sing its praises now. Our entire marketing department had to get behind it and have the same vocabulary. But the first thing that we did is, so we have a guy on our team named Danny, and he's really awesome. And he's just an optimization guy. Like, he just loves all of this stuff.
And he's British.
And he was like, no, I'm not. Yeah. He lives in Manchester. So I'm not going to run these. I'm not going to run these ads until you guys clean your shit up. And we had, the prior guard like put a lot of stuff to market without CTAs in the back, and just we were sloppy. We didn't check, and like there was a lot of stuff to clean up, and that's it. Ads aren't magic. You have to have all the stuff in place. Your CTAs at the back have to tell a reader what to do next, and they have to be explicit. And this is another one of those areas where you can't just assume that your writing is so awesome and your characters are so magnetic that the reader's going to stop what they're doing and let dinner burn and go get your next book. They don't care that much. So you have to make it really easy. Other platforms coming up, do you think that those three are going to be the primary for some time? Do you see anything new coming up? And tied into that, audio. So I know that there's Chirp, and audio seems to be really growing. Do you think that's an entirely separate ad platform, or the same tools used in a different way?
It's funny you should say that, Sean, because there is something else coming up. We have something kind of bubbling up called Hello Books, which we're going to be launching reasonably soon. So as similar, I mean, they're kind of a Facebook ads driven and kind of author cooperative in the early days, and very, very cheap in terms of how much those ads will cost. So yeah, we've been working on that for about a year. So we have the website is pretty much ready to go. We've actually got people to invest in this one. So we've got a couple of, well, I won't say who they are because I don't want to.
This is wonderful. I had it to ask you about Hello Books, and this is a wonderful segue. Thank you.
So we don't know. I'm fairly confident this will work quite well. But there's no guarantees because we've never done this before. So it's kind of, we're trying to build something based on a lot of Facebook advertising. We've got one of the shareholders in the company is the guy who basically taught me how to do Facebook ads. He's really, 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 really good. So he will be running the ads, and we've got a lot of authors who want to be involved early on, which is great. So we'll see. I mean, this is certainly not competing with BookBub, which is still the gold standard as far as I'm concerned when it comes to those kinds of platforms. But it could be a nice little second division player in time. That's what we're hoping to do. But beyond that, and that is a bit speculative and a bit aggrandizing for me to mention a project that we're working on. In terms of beyond the Holy Trinity, I don't actually see that much beyond that. You can look at Google. We've messed around with Google before. The CPC is way too high. It's people bidding who are selling cars, for example. Yeah. So we can't compete with $3.99 ebooks in a way that makes those CPCs profitable. So I don't think Google is something that we like. We've tried YouTube. We think that's a little bit too expensive. We do it for the courses because those are a bit more expensive. There's a bit more margin for us to play with. Twitter, not effective. We've tried that. We've tried lots and lots of different things. And the ones that we teach are the ones that we know work. But who knows beyond that? I mean, maybe someone will come up. And on Chirp, I haven't run any Chirp ads myself because all my audio is done. I license it to either Audible or to producers, people like Podium, Tantor, people like that. But I've seen plenty of people in the SPF community talking about how Chirp deals are working. And the one I saw about a week ago someone about a year ago did a chirp deal, and I think her return on investment sold 300. It was Lindsay Broker. That's who it was. I heard she sold 300 copies of the book, the audiobook that she was advertising, and then a year later, obviously BookBub, Chirp are investing heavily in that audience. She sold 900. So clear growth there. And BookBub, they know their shit, right? They know what they're doing. Yeah. They will build a platform that effectively sells audiobooks. I think they probably already have done. So yeah, I think that's kind of the way I see it right now. I don't see anyone kind of muscling in, but there might be new players who kind of offer different strategies that develop over the next 12 months to 18 months.
How about KU versus wide? How do you think that argument will evolve over the next few years?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. I mean, I'm lucky enough. I know people at all of the main companies. I've from playing tennis with the guys from Apple at Nink, James and I got thrashed last year.
Wasn't thrashed.
Well, you weren't thrashed because you were quite good, and I was on the other team, and I got thrashed. So yeah,
yes.
that was.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you did get thrashed. Now I remember.
I did.
Yeah, because I was on the other side.
So, and kind of philosophically, I have a problem with exclusivity because who wouldn't? It doesn't.
Yeah.
In a competitive sense, I don't love the idea that one company controls so much. Now, on the other hand, I don't have that kind of irrational fear of Amazon that lots of people have. I know lots of Amazonians, and all of them are really great people. They all in the books team. They all tend to love books. It's not the Death Star. That they do care about what they do, and also, Amazon built this industry, so I think they're entitled to take a big slice of it. Because if it wasn't for Amazon, I'd still be a lawyer. James would still be watching pornography.
You can do both.
Job. It used to be my job just to point that out, and his. Yeah.
That's how he knew the plumber thing.
Exactly.
He did come up with that really quickly.
I've seen a lot of plumbers. A lot of plumbing.
Yeah.
A lot of pipe laying. Okay.
There you go. That's completely thrown me. But no, it's
Bonnie, say something so they know there's a woman here.
I do apologize.
Woohoo!
So yeah, I don't think there is one answer to that. There are lots of authors who are doing amazingly well wide, and I was wide in between KU1 and then KU2. I was wide for about 18 months and did really well. I was really pleased with how that went. Apple was great, Kobo, these are all great companies. But then subsequently, I went back into KU, and it was in retrospect, it was a scary decision because I was worried about pissing off lots of readers who couldn't get my books anymore, gambling on KU, but it really, really paid off. It was a very good decision. But loads of other people are doing very well wide. So it's one of those things. I think you've got to think about your acceptance of risk, even kind of political, philosophical decisions about monopolies and things like that. And how much time do you have? Do you want to learn how to market on 4 platforms, or do you want to master one? That's another perfectly legitimate reason to be exclusive. It's a hard one because I also know that by basically encouraging people who see how I've done and will try to follow that, will go into KU. And I might be slitting my own throat because, it's not beyond it's possible next year Amazon goes, actually going to pay 60% at the top end. I don't know. But, right now I've got to make a decision based on how can I pay my mortgage best. And for me personally, that's by being in KU.
All right, well, that's actually perfect. Let's do a little future casting. So what do you see for the next, 1, 3, and 5 years for the industry, but then also just for you? Actually, 2-pronged, fiction business and nonfiction business, because those are very different businesses, right? One, I'm sure you'll, want to get some TV shows on the air, but there probably will never be a self-publishing TV show. Although maybe I could actually see that. So
who wouldn't want to watch this every week?
Never mind. I take that back. What do you see over the next few years, industry-wide and then professionally on both sides?
Well, we've just kind of speaking for myself. I mean, I'm reasonably confident there'll be a TV show at some point. You never know with Hollywood, but there's enough interest now to think that might happen. I'm continuing to look at different ways to get my product into the hands of different readers. So I can't really talk about this too much yet, but I'm quite reasonably confident there'll be a comic soon. So I know, that'll be something that Dave would have some views on. So that looking forward to that potentially coming out in the next year or so. Audio, I think, is a big growth area. You're seeing a big acceleration in people wanting to listen to their stories, and you're seeing a kind of commensurate increase in the ability for readers, for writers to get their books into audio, and then also for companies like the Podiums, the Tantors, Audible Studios to actually start offering decent advances to creators who want to get their books licensed, and then they don't want to do the production themselves, which is kind of, that's me. I'm pushing in other areas, and obviously I won't talk about this too much because it's just not worth the ball ache, but I had plenty of, I'm pushing quite hard in hardback right now. So there's the hardback of the first book in the Milton series has done really well. It's in stores. There's going to be a US launch next year. So that's looking quite good. So that's where I am. I don't know how that'll play out, but it's interesting and fun to be doing it. James can talk about SPF, but just in terms of the industry, I don't think we're anywhere near peak self-publishing. I think authors it's very easy sometimes in our little echo chamber to think that everyone is buying digitally. But if you actually look at the statistics, that most people by quite a long way still prefer to hold a book as a physical artifact rather than read it on a device. And that's clearly changing. And I think COVID has helped.
COVID accelerated that.
If it's helped any, it obviously hasn't helped much, but in terms of bringing readers back to reading, and in a way that, you don't have to go to the store, or you don't have to accept a virus encrusted cardboard box from Amazon. You can just, with a couple of clicks, it's on your device and you can read it.
I'm going to use that in our next marketing copy.
Yeah. I think that's definitely, I've seen, just, it's a bit anecdotal, but you see lots of industries really struggling, because the virus has basically taken their customers away. For me, my sales are up about 30% because people reading is virus proof. It's a perfect activity for lockdown. So I think that probably it's accelerating, but I don't think we are anywhere near the apogee yet. I think there's loads more to go. And I don't think print will ever die either. I think they will continue to coexist fairly comfortably, but I think the ratio will shift from one to the other a little bit more. What about you, James? What do you think about SPF?
In terms of the non-fiction side, SPF, I do think a lot about where self-publishing is, and we talk about it all day, every day. We know it inside out. We toss names like BookBub around, but I'm really struck by the fact that outside of this circle, people know very little about it. BookBub, we talk about them being world standard. We love the BookBub guys. They get everything right. They're a brilliant company. My wife is a whale consumer of books, and she reads on a Kindle when we go away. She often does actually read hardbacks, paperbacks at home. She's never heard of BookBub, never heard of it. And she's always looking for the next. She reads quite a lot of the authors we interview because I just suggest them to her. So she's like the perfect person for BookBub, right? To get that email once a week, exactly for her fiction genre. So we did a little thing researching for Hello Books, is to ask everyone we met, have you heard of BookBub? And I'm not singling out BookBub. It's just a litmus test for how much penetration there's been from self-publishing into the mainstream world. It's still small, but this year has been our biggest year for SPF. Our biggest launch of Ads for Authors was this year. Most number of students signed. We've had a couple of months where we've been signing 7,500 new people to our mailing list in a month. We've done that already this month. COVID has accelerated it, but actually it began at the end of last year. It feels to me that we're in the foothills. We're not anywhere near the peak. We're in the foothills of the peak. And I think I said this to you a couple of years ago, actually. We were standing around the bar in Florida. I think I talked about as just not, meandering around, ideas coming up and going down, and no one's really sure what the future is going to look like and how it's going to settle down. I think we're still there at the moment. It's an immature industry. I mean that politely, but it's about to take off, is my hunch. I support Cambridge United, a tiny football club who lose all the time, so I am an eternal optimist. But it feels to me like we are on the cusp of making it mainstream.
Yeah, that all sounds right. Johnny or Bonnie? Dave actually got in a windstorm. So that's where he's gone off to.
Well, Dave's in Florida where they're changing the national animal to COVID. So
yes.
So he's
has he gone down into one of those like bunkers they had in?
Gone down? He was always in one.
Dave hasn't left his bunker in 5 months now. Is the thing.
His family has sent out a search party. They don't know that he's actually in the house. No, I actually had. There were a few times, I don't know if you saw my mute go on and off, whatever. Like I was about to ask the questions that you then immediately asked. So no, I'm actually good. I was going to ask about KU versus Wide and stuff. So I don't know if Bonnie has anything.
No, I just want the URL where I can find those pornos where the plumber actually fixes the leak in one visit.
Yeah.
It's like Honest Trailers.
Oh,
only
you're getting Bonnie all hot. Oh, plumber. Yeah. He finishes his work. Awesome.
Yeah. Do you think there's a market for that?
Yes. Yeah. Have you seen? I forget what it's called. It's on YouTube.
Is it the movie trailer one you're talking
about? No. It's called Good Porn. And there's this guy, and he's like, all like, I think he may wear a bow tie. I'm not sure. In fact, I may have heard about these and not actually seen them. But the guy, the whole premise is he is with real porn stars, but they're doing things like taking him home and he introduces her to mom. Like, but that's the whole video. Or like washing dishes together, or like they're making the bed.
That's awesome.
Looking up at the stars or the clouds and deciding what shapes they are. Really, really ridiculous.
We never saw anything like that, Mark, in our day, did we?
No, we didn't.
It was never a happy. I almost said it was never a happy ending, but it was.
That would have been perfect.
It was always a happy ending. Yeah. That was a weird time in our lives. I can't try not to.
Some of my friends, way to end the show.
They still ask me about it, but it's gone. It's like a dream or a nightmare.
All right. Well, so I guess that's probably about it, but I would just remind everybody that selfpublishingformula.com is, and I don't know if anybody noticed, but I went and got my mug.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. So I'm good. And just thanks for being on. Thanks for being the authorities. Thanks for being a force for good in the industry. You guys have sort of stood the test of time. I was saying that earlier because, of course, in self-publishing worlds, if you're around for
you
5
guys are
years.
Like 84 years old.
Yeah.
Self-publishing.
If you manage to survive for 5 years without dying or being arrested by the FBI or something, then you're good. So that's great. Yeah.
Well, you were elder statesman when we met you. I can't tell you how nervous I was meeting you and doing that first interview.
Be nervous around me.
I know that's what you kept saying, but for me, I'd been listening to the podcast and I thought you were like legendary guys. I still do, by the way. I think you're legendary guys. And,
thank you very much. You actually, James, there was an interview. I forget. Well, it was one of the ones I was listening to that happened in the last year, and somebody was talking about being at one of our events and telling a story, and you said something very nice about me, and I was walking, and I'm like, they're talking about me. So it was fun, and you were very kind. So thank you very much, and thank you seriously, both of you, for being on and just doing great work in the community and making us all better. Just really, we're better together, and thank you.
We are.
Thanks for having us.
Amen.
So thanks for all the listeners for listening to our State of the Industry podcast with Mark Dawson and James Blatch. And thanks again to you guys. And we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Adios.
Super.